General manager is a relatively new position in Russian hockey, and KHL general managers are all sorts of people. Some of them never play professional hockey. But at Atlant, it's completely the opposite. Atlant's general manager is Olympic champion Alexei Zhamnov. He joined Atlant last season after spending several years at Vitesse. It's time to evaluate his work. Alexei Zhamnov is one of the best signers in the history of Russian hockey. He began his international career for Team USSR. He won a silver medal at the World Juniors and then won bronze at the World Championship in 1991. After that, he won gold at the 1992 Olympics, silver at the 1998 Olympics, and another bronze medal in 2002 in Salt Lake City. He played just for a couple of teams in his pro career. He began his journey in Dynamo Moscow, then went overseas to play for the Winnipeg Jets, Boston Bruins and Chicago Blackhawks, and retired as a Vitesse player back in Russia. He once set a record for Russian players in the NHL, scoring 5 goals in a single game. During the second NHL lockout, he could have signed with Akbars, but preferred a rather modest offer from Vitesse. He's a world-class hockey player, says Valery Kamenský. He proved that many times. It was a pleasure to play along his side, and it was also a pleasure to play against him in the NHL. But this episode is not about Zhamnov's playing career. This is about him being a general manager. Quite often, this side of hockey is not in the spotlight. For Zhamnov, it all began in 2007 with Vitesse. I'm very grateful to Vitesse, says Zhamnov. They gave me the opportunity to kickstart my career as a GM when I needed it. Had they not offered me the job back then, I wouldn't be where I am now. These images are from Atlant's last year's preseason camp. Right now there are a lot of new faces on the team, and they take in their pictures for game programs, website, and so on. Alexei Zhamnov was the one who built this team. This is one of the most important parts of his job. It's a tough job to sign new players, even in the summer. The market is not exactly deep. There are not many good Russian players, and the ones that are available, their price is just through the roof. Many other GMs in the league can agree with me about this. I think it would be better for the league if we were allowed to dress 7 import players. It would be easy to shuffle your roster, and you'd be able to sign the same or better players for less money. Zhamnov is certain that the import player limit should be improved, otherwise it gives great advantage to non-Russian clubs. Medveshchak is a pain in the neck for a lot of people in the league. Everybody says, look at their budget, it's extremely small, and yet they're doing really well. Of course they're doing well. They don't have to deal with the import player limit. Russian clubs have much bigger budgets, so every time a small budget team beats a big budget team, it's all over the news. But you have to keep in mind the difference between Medveshchak and Magnitogorsk or Atlant. Therefore, one of the biggest challenges for Zhamnov is signing good import players, and last season he was very disappointed by how Bobby Sanguinetti's deal turned out. Unfortunately, Sanguinetti got injured and had to leave to America for a surgery, so he basically lost the season. And then we were in the dark about when he would return and what condition he would return in. One other import defenseman at Atlant last season was Finn Janne Niskala. He's a world champion, and that was his 3rd season with the team. He started the season very poorly, and then he also got injured, although he did play better once he recovered. Another import on Atlant is Swede Andreas Enqvist. This season is going to be his 3rd with the team. Zhamnov is very pleased with the way he performs. I have nothing bad to say about him. He's a good center. He lived up to our expectations. We didn't expect him to be a superstar, but we did expect him to be a good center, and that's exactly who he is. As for another import, Finn Juha-Pekka Hataja, he wasn't very liked by the fans. He was a top scorer in the Finnish league in the previous season. Then he joined our team and his numbers went down. I believe it happened because KHL hockey is a little different from Finnish league. Maybe he didn't adapt to Russia too. Zhamnov also signed a player he used to play against way back in the day in the NHL. And that calls for a little story. Zhamnov was supposed to play for Olympic Team Russia in 2006. Back then he was playing for the Boston Bruins. One night his skate got stuck between the boards and ice when a massive opponent checked him into the boards. Zhamnov had to undergo through many surgeries, but he never fully recovered and he had to retire. Ironically, that player was Evgeny Artuhin, and years later Zhamnov signed him to Atlant as the club's general manager. It wasn't intentional by any means, says Artuhin. It was an accident. I think Zhamnov wanted to check me, so I checked him back, and that's what happened. It's a shame, really. He was a really good player, and his career could have lasted way longer. Stuff like that just happens. There's nothing to it. Of course it was frustrating to retire from professional hockey when the Olympics were just a month away. But this is what athlete's life looks like. It could happen to anybody. 2 years ago, Atlant made it to the playoffs. The final push paid off. And last season, they found themselves in a similar position, but this time with a bitter end. Surprisingly, Atlant didn't make any moves before the trade deadline, except letting go one of the key players, Ilya Kablukov, who signed with SKA. We decided that we needed to move players with big contracts if we wanted to make our team better. Unfortunately, other teams weren't interested much in our players, so it was hard to move them. The biggest decision Zhamnov had to take that season was firing Atlant's head coach Sergei Svetlov. Zhamnov let him go really early in the season, replacing him with the young coach Alexei Zhamnov. Svetlov was the one who ensured Atlant's playoff berth a year ago, but that didn't matter much once the new season began. Atlant did not get off to a good start at all. I think the coaching staff couldn't get on the same page with our players, and that was the key to our bad start. When you look back at the preseason games and at first games of the regular season, all you see is just one win. I didn't see any reason to be optimistic. I knew our players didn't get along too well with the coach, too. I had to do something. Making this decision is what being a general manager is all about, but it doesn't make it easy. It's one thing when you're a player, but when you're a manager and you have to fire someone, it's not easy at all. Even though this is how life works, you know that this person has to find another job. It's never easy to look somebody in the eye and say that he's fired. Zhamnov had to find another coach, and fast. He replaced Svetlov with the 42-year-old Alexei Kudashov. It wasn't that long ago that he won the Gagarin Cup as a Dynamo Moscow player. He spent just one season as Atlant's assistant coach. He gathered a really young staff around him. Goalie coach Maxim Sokolov, who also just recently retired. Other coaches are Evgeny Namestnikov and Alex Savchenkov. I believe it's a good thing that we have a young coaching staff now. We're rebuilding. It is not necessarily our goal to win the Gagarin Cup this season. We're building a new team. It takes time. I don't see a problem with them being young. Everybody needs to start somewhere. All great coaches have. They were given a chance and they used it. Despite having a great experience, Zhamnov does not get involved with his coach's work. He follows the game from the press box, and every now and then he expresses his thoughts. You have to trust your coach. He's the one who is responsible for the result. I try my best not to interfere with his work, so he wouldn't get nervous, because every time I show up, they start thinking whether it's a good sign or not. I just watch them play, and if I feel I have to say something, I talk to the coach. Coach is not the only person Zhamnov shares his thoughts with. He also meets with the fans, even though it's not exactly in his job description. This is what his meeting in January looked like. He told the fans he's not gonna give out any secrets, but he will try his best to give honest answers to their questions. What's my strategy, you ask? Let me tell you a story. I met with Dean Lombardi, general manager of the Los Angeles Kings. That was his first year with the team. I flew to LA to meet with him. Then I met with Mr. Bowman, general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks. Both of them had a 4-year plan. I don't know exactly why it has to be a 4-year plan, but they had it. They walked me through it step by step. Chicago won the Stanley Cup in 4 years. LA won the cup in 5. The fans were pleased with this meeting. They told Zhamnov they weren't angry with the team's recent results, but they would really appreciate if the team was more open about its problems. It's easy to face the fans when your team is winning, right? But it's not easy to face them when your team is undergoing through a crisis. But you have to do it, it's important. 80% of them have no idea what's really going on. This is going to be Zhamnov's 3rd season with Atlant. And it's fair to say that the fans would really appreciate if this time the 4-year plan he talked about would bring them better results.